Hello, everybody. It is the final chapter of The Outlaw Varjak Paw by S.F. Said, illustrated by Dave McKeen. It's the final night. I've got a ton of shout outs to do. However, before we start on this beautiful, beautiful evening, we are going to have a flashback. Okay, we're going to have a flashback because a couple of you have actually written, and I know SF Said will be listening to this, written a sub-chapter to squeeze in between the chapters. So we're going to have a flashback to remember when Holly fell. Okay, so just imagine that's just happened. That horrible thing with Mrs. Moggs in the yard has happened, and Varjak and his friends are trying to get away. What went through their minds? Listen to this. Jess was panting, out of breath and tired. Everyone felt like giving up and surrendering to Sally Bones' gang, but something rose from Varjak, something he'd never felt before. It was like revenge. He was furious at Sally Bones' gang for killing Holly and Mrs. Moggs. He said to his friends in rage, "Don't give up. We won't go down without a fight. We just need to push ourselves a bit further." He was trying to motivate them, hoping it would help them. And it did motivate them, right when they were about to give up. So that was lucky. They had lost Sally Bones and her gang, so they went back to see how Cludge was doing. But all they saw was red snow and no dog. So they must have done. And that was by Aidan Wheeler. Thank you, Aidan. This could have been what happened to Holly. Holly hit the ground with a deafening thud. The last thing she remembered was gnawing at the wire and falling to what was supposed to be certain death. Ignoring the fact that she was covered in scratches and blood, she clambered to her feet. It appeared luck was on her side that day, for she had landed in a thick pile of snow beside the motionless Bones' cat. She searched the body for even the slightest sign of life, but found none. There was blood splattered on the fallen snow, which soon became lost in the fresh new layers of snow that covered all the evidence of the tragic death. The red reminded her of what happened back at the dock. "Oh no, Mrs. Moggs! I need to get back to the dock before it's too late!" exclaimed Holly in a nervous manner, and that was the last word she spoke before sprinting into the murky night. And that was by Opal Wheeler. Thank you, Aidan and Opal, for those mini sub-chapter flashbacks. Amazing! The writing is such good quality. I reckon S.F. Said would probably, say that was worthy of including in his book. Amazing! Outstanding! Great. So, Opal and Aidan, massive shout-outs to you, obviously. And now let's go down the list of shout-outs we've got to do. Alfred and Jilly, homeschooling with Grandma. Well done, and well done, Grandma, too. Bryony and her amazing, wonderful teacher, Miss Giltinan, who introduced them to Varjak Paw in the first place. Big shout-out to you. Thank you very much. Obviously, Fionn and Jocelyn, whoop, 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 whoop. Thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Storm class from Charter Primary School. Thank you so much for sending that photo. It was lovely to see you all enjoying the story. Leon Cordingley, thank you for listening. And then we've got Amara, Elizabeth O'Brien, Adam in Johannesburg, Mr. Davis, don't forget, with his boys, Ed, Ibrahim, Will, Rayan and Will. Thank you for listening, and thanks so much for sending in those emails with your questions and your pictures. Amazing. Melise in Enfield, Nuala and all at Walwayn Court School in Trowbridge in Wiltshire. Sidra in London, awesome. Will North from North Yorkshire. Year 4 at Perry Hall Primary School as well. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson, awesome. The Cowans, Dylan, Erin and Callum, excellent. Imi, Hattie and Sebi from Yorkshire, big shout out to you. Thank you for listening. Noah and Lucas in Loch Gilphead on the west coast of Scotland. Did I say that right? Loch Gilphead. Awesome, I hope so. Ted and Barbara, as well as Rob and family. James and Karen from Glasgow, Juliet, Florence, William and Beatrice, and of course, last but not least, my favourite children of all time, my children, Grace, Asher, Karis and Anya. Thank you for letting me read and take myself away from playtime and walk time and dinner time to be able to do this for everybody. So thank you massively. And most of all, thank you to SF Saeed and Dave McKeen and the publishers for allowing us to read this, allowing me to read this out loud, a chapter a night. And isn't it amazing, because this is the last week when most of us will be homeschooling, and then we'll be going back to proper school next week. If that's not you, if you've got to stay home and look after yourself, then please stay safe. But if you are going back to school, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's good fun to see all your friends again. And I've no idea what will happen in the future, but maybe, just maybe, I'll be here reading some stories in the future. So we'll have to wait and see. But thank you everybody for tuning in, listening and subscribing. Oh, and a massive thank you to those of you who've actually sent me gifts. That is very generous of you as well. I love the vouchers, so that has just made me ridiculously happy. Thank you for your generosity. You know who you are. Massive thank you. Okay, chapter 31, and this is what happened, remember? Dun dun dun, chapter 31. It was over. Yes. At last it was done. Sally Bones was gone. Varjak, you did it! You did it! Holly's spiky fur rippled in the sunlight as she came towards him. He slumped down in the tower, hardly able to believe it. Did I really make it? He said. Did I hold on till dawn? You did! You beat Sally Bones! He shook his head in wonder. I couldn't have done it without you, Holly. I know. Now stop bleeding. You're making a mess. Gently she licked his wounds. As she did, he watched the daylight streaming into the bell tower. He watched the dust swirling in the light. And he watched Holly. Her eyes had definitely changed. One was mustard-coloured and the other ice blue. It was strange, yet both her eyes were shining with new hope. She looked up at him, met his gaze, and looked deep into his eyes. It felt like she was seeing inside him with her ice blue eye, seeing his secrets, laying him bare, just as Sally Bones had done. But this was Holly, his friend. And this time he felt no fear, no darkness, no despair. He just felt the loveliest warmth flowing between them once more. She nodded. So you did it, Varjak Paw, she said softly. You actually climbed a mountain? He smiled. There was so much to tell her, so much to share. And guess what else? We found where all the mice go in winter. It's the best hunting ever. And wait till you meet Cludge's family. And Cludge's family! Yes, and I wouldn't have made it without them either. Or the Scratch Sisters, or Razor. Come on, said Holly. Let's go. There's not much more I can do about these wounds. There'll be scars everywhere, but you'll live. They limped down the stairs together, very slowly, one step at a time. It was a very long way down. Varjak was so tired, and every muscle, every bone, every strand of fur ached. But as they made it down the final steps out of the tower, he felt lifted once again. For there were his friends waiting for him, and Holly in the graveyard. They were going wild, cheering, whooping into the dawn. Cludge and his brothers were yelping with joy. The horrible twins were dancing on the tombstones. Razor and the Scratch Sisters were dancing with them. On you do it, bubbled Tom. I knew it, on you do it. On you it, I knew it, I knew it. Grandma always said he would, purred Jess. Sally Bones' cats were in total disarray. Her captains approached Varjak very cautiously. They were still rubbing their eyes. Did he really beat the boss? Said Luca. How? Nobody can beat her. She's the greatest fighter who ever lived. Not anymore, said Holly. Varjak won. That makes him the greatest. Varjak Paw! His friends hailed him. Varjak Paw! Varjak Paw! Varjak Paw! Was he hearing right? Could he really be the greatest after all? It wasn't possible. But the greatest friends, the greatest pack, the greatest gang in the world. Yes, oh yes, no doubt about that. A slow smile spread across his face, and he looked up at the sky. The sun was rising high. It was a beautiful morning. There's been enough fighting in this city, Varjak said to Sally Bones' captains. There'll be no more. We're going back to the centre, and we're going in peace. The centre is our territory. You can't come and tell us what to do anymore. Our law runs free there now, the law of freedom. It's a free city for free cats, and nothing you can ever do will change that. Sally Bones' captains looked at each other, still dazed, and then, one by one, they stood aside, silent, heads bowed, tails between their legs. They parted to let him and his friends go through. Varjak and Holly led the way, with Tam and Jess beside them. Razor and the Scratch Sisters and the Horrible Twins flanked them. Cludge, Buster and Bombalulu brought up the rear, barking happily into the dawn. Together they made their way out of the graveyard, back across the river, through the streets and alleys, to the centre of their city. Everyone was talking about how Varjak Paw beat Sally Bones. The tale would be told again and again in the times to come. It would be remembered on long winter nights. In their darkest hours, it would give them hope. For all the free cats, life in the city began again that morning. As they went back to their homes, their alleys, their harbour, the sun rose higher and higher in the sky. The sky was clear and blue, and the sun shone amber in the blue. Its rays reflected on the great glass towers and the tall brown buildings alike. Everything gleamed in the bright, silent sunlight. The whole city sparkled and shone. The sun began to melt the winter snow. Soon it would become a stream, a warm, clear stream of water that would wash the streets clean, then flow out through the river to make its way in wide, strong currents out towards the sea. Winter was over. Spring would soon begin. And that is the very end of the Outlaw Varjak Paw. Amazing. Do you know what? It feels like that now, doesn't it? It feels like it's been so cold and so dark, and now the sun's coming back out. Lockdown's starting to be lifted. We're going back to school. It just feels like this sort of mirrored our journey a little bit through this. So, getting all emotional now. But thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. And again, thank you to SF Said for writing such a brilliant book. Absolutely loved it. And please, 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 can you go and tweet, if you can, tweet SF Said or get your adult to tweet him and just say how much you've enjoyed this and how much joy it's brought you, and what a great book it is. I'm sure he'd really appreciate that. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And don't forget, keep the way alive.